Hello everybody and welcome to Books with Ike. My name is Isaac and today I am going to be going over some more books that I read recently. And recently is a bit of an overstatement really, because this is my wrap up for April, May and June. Yeah, I was supposed to do the April and May wrap up in one video and then the June one in another one, because I was gonna post the April and May wrap up in June. But that didn't happen. That didn't happen at all. So I read 4 books in April, 3 books in May, and 3 books in June. And I'm just gonna get on into them. The first book I read in April was City of Betrayal by Claudie Arsenault, or Arsenault, I'm not sure which it is. So this is the second book in the City of Spires series, which is one of my favourite series of all time. The first book, City of Strife, was one of my favourite books ever. And now that I've finally got around to reading this, I am not disappointed at all. I've given both books in the series 4.5 stars, and I hope that the last 2 books will be just as great. So this is an adult high fantasy set in the free city of Isandor, and Isandor is one of the last free cities standing against the tyrannical Myrian Empire, and the Myrians have an enclave in the city, and their leader, Master Avenazar, uses his position to get up to terrible things. And Lord Diel Dathiri of Isandor has had enough, and he wants to unite the great houses of Isandor and drive the Myrians out of the city. But first he has to contend with all the grudges between the houses. Meanwhile, Lord Arathiel Braston returns to Isandor after a century of being trapped in a place where time doesn't flow, and not knowing if his family still exists or if they would accept him if it did, he takes shelter in the slums. This series has a full LGBT+ cast, and when I say LGBT+, I mean LGBT+. There are all of the LGBT identities, but there's also aromantic asexual characters, there's non-binary characters, there's polyamorous characters. It's a whole bunch. And this story is very much focused on issues of identity, of race, of class, of gender, of sexuality, and it is all masterfully worked into the plot. And speaking of the plot, this book picks up from where the last one ended. Obviously, it's a series, they do that, what the hell am I saying? And deals with the fallout of some decisions that were made at the end of the previous book. And I can't really say more than that, but as I said, I did give this 4.5 stars. I loved the character development in this, and I loved the way the plot unfolded. It was a little bit predictable in parts, and the villains are still not the best, but I still love the characters. This has one of my favourite found families in all of fiction, and there was some really cute romantic development in this, but there was some that I wasn't happy with as well. But yeah, this book was also pretty harrowing, because the first book makes you fall in love with all of these characters, and then this book just tortures them relentlessly. And the next book is called City of Torment, so I'm not sure if it will get any better for them. But yeah, I love this series, and I can't wait for the next book to come out. I will leave a link to the review for the first book and the notes I wrote for this book in the description. The next book I have to talk about is Stalking Darkness by Lynn Llewellyn. And this is the second book in the Night Runner series, and the first book was Luck in the Shadows. So obviously I can't say too much about this book since it is a sequel, but the first book is about a boy called Alec of Kerry who is arrested for poaching, and he performs a jailbreak with the help of his fellow inmate Serigil. And Serigil takes Alec on as a travelling companion and eventually an apprentice, because Serigil is part of a secret spy network and he thinks Alec has what it takes to join them. So I liked Luck in the Shadows, I gave it 3.5 stars, but this book was incredible. I gave it 4.5 stars. The atmosphere is just amazing, the character development is great, the prose itself is excellent, the romantic development between Alec and Serigil was also great, the plot was really good, there were some really disturbing scenes, there were some really cute scenes. There were some good new characters that I really liked. It has a brilliant depiction of war, and there were some really emotional moments as well. If this series continues in the same vein, then it might end up being one of my favourites of all time. I will say that Alec is 16 in these first two books at least, and Seragil is an adult, and they have a romantic relationship. So if you don't want to read about that, I would skip this series. Obviously, I don't condone that sort of thing in real life, but I'm willing to give fiction leeway in that area, especially fantasy, because that's pretty common for the genre, at least as far as I'm aware. Next, I read Seasons of War by Derek Landy, which is the 13th or 14th book in the Skullduggery Pleasant series, depending on how you look at it, and my god, was this just an absolute mindfuck. So much happens in this book, but before I get into that, I will give a synopsis for Skullduggery Pleasant. If somehow you didn't know, if this is your first video on my channel, Skullduggery Pleasant is my favourite series of all time. It is about a 12-year-old Irish girl called Stephanie Edgley, whose Uncle Gordon dies and leaves everything in his will to her, and she gets left alone in his house after a flood, and a man breaks in searching for a key, and she is rescued from this man by Skullduggery Pleasant, a magical detective who just so happens to be a reanimated skeleton. The series follows Stephanie as she grows up, and in the latest books she is 25 years old, but it is still a middle grade series. So the previous book, Bedlam, ended on a massive, massive cliffhanger, so I was very anxious to see how it would be resolved. Turns out, bit of an anticlimax. Nothing about the rest of this book is an anticlimax. I thought I was going to give it 4 stars for the majority of the thing, and then in the last 100 pages or so, I was like, okay, I'm going to bump this up to a 4.5. Then in the last 50 pages, it became a full 5 stars. Because I thought I knew where this series was going. I really thought I knew. But no, I didn't know. I didn't know where this series was going at all. Everything I thought was going to happen, that was going to be the plot for the end of this series, wrapped up in this book. What the fuck is going to happen now? I don't know. There was just so much happened in the last 150 pages, or whatever, that I'm still shaken from it now, and it's been, what, 2 months since I read it? Like, literally, when I finished this book, I stood up and walked around the room, like, wringing my hands, silently whispering what the fuck to myself over and over again. Where the hell can this series go from here? I have absolutely no idea, and I love that. And there is someone watching, probably, who is a friend. You need to catch up so I can talk about this with you. Please. Yeah, needless to say, this was going to be one of my favourite books of the year. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, I loved it. The character development and the plot development and everything about it was incredible. It's Skullduggery Pleasant. What else do you expect me to say? If you haven't read Skullduggery Pleasant, read it. Just, this is like, I mention it in every single video at this point, I'm pretty sure. So, if I haven't convinced you by now, I probably never will, but I will continue to try. And the last book I read in April was Magic's Promise by Mercedes Lackey, and this is the second book in the Valdemar the Last Herald Mage trilogy, which is part of the overall Valdemar world. And the first book, Magic's Pawn, was about a boy called Vaniel, who is kicked out of his house for failing to live up to his father's standards of masculinity, and sent to stay with his Aunt Seville, who his father hopes will be able to straighten him out. And yes, I mean that literally. This is set 10 years after the first book, and so Vaniel is no longer a boy, and this book explores his continuing adventures. And this was a good book, this was a fun book, I gave it 4 stars. There was some really great character development for some characters that you never expected to be developed, and the plot was interesting, and the new characters were great, and there were some really great scenes, and it was good. It was a good book. Then the first book I read in May was Magic's Price by Mercedes Lackey, and I'm still salty. Still so very salty. This is still a good book. I gave it 3.5 stars, but it was so disappointing. This was a 5-star prediction, and the fact that it didn't live up to my expectations is just the worst. So I thought I would give this 5 stars for the first half of the book, and then I liked the third quarter, and then the ending made me absolutely furious. Just, oh. There's a really cute romance in here. The character development for Vanyel is great. The new characters are really fun. There are some really emotional scenes and emotional moments and great moments. And I do still think it is worth finishing the trilogy, but neither of these books compare to Magic's Pawn in the slightest, and it's really disappointing. And so I've only said positive things about this so far, in terms of specifics, and so you're probably wondering why it was so disappointing. Because it needed to be 200 pages longer to adequately address everything that was brought up in this book. Oh, the ending is so rushed, and there is some really poorly handled sexual assault in here. There is a really graphic rape scene, and it is so poorly done. Oh. And they basically just do a montage of the character's recovery instead of actually dedicating some time to it. The antagonist is absolutely garbage. He was set up in the first book. We learn nothing about him. Absolutely nothing. He is a complete non-entity. He has no relevance to the story at all, and it's so annoying. Oh. And then the ending is just, it makes me so angry. Just, oh. I'm being too harsh on this book. It's fine. It's fine. But it could have been so much more. It should have been so much more. I forgot, there was also really nice development to the magic system as well, and some interesting new creatures. So yeah, do still read the trilogy. It's really good, but it's just so disappointing. It could have been so much more. The next book I read in May was another 5-star prediction, and that was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. And this was much more satisfying. This didn't get 5 stars either, but this was a 4.5 stars. So this is an adult high fantasy about a boy who is the bastard son of a prince. And his maternal grandparents decide that they can't be bothered to raise the boy, so they take him to the royal castle and leave him there and say it's up to the prince to look after him. Instead, the prince abdicates the throne and leaves. So the boy is brought up by the prince's stable hand, Boric, and eventually the king decides to make use of him by training him as an assassin. So this book was great. Oh, the character work in this is just incredible. I love all of the characters, especially Boric and Verity and Catrican and Rurisk and everyone who isn't Galen or Regal. They're all so good. They're all such brilliant characters in here. The plot isn't really there, to be honest. There isn't much of a plot. This is an intensely character-driven book. But the plot that is there is really intriguing. This book is relentlessly depressing, as a warning, because the main character starts as a 5-year-old boy who has been abandoned by everybody. And this book follows him as he grows up, and I believe he's 14 or 15 by the end of the book. But his life is just so tragic. It's just sad thing after sad thing happens in this book. And there's quite a bit of animal death as well, so if that bothers you, don't read it. But yeah, I loved the characters and the world building, and what little plot there was interesting. I didn't actually love the main character himself until there was a moment that I realised I did, and I'm not going to tell you what the moment was, obviously, but you'll probably know it when you read it. Yeah, I gave it 4.5 stars. I'll leave a link to my notes in the description, and the same goes for every book in this video in case I forget to say it. And after that, the last book I read in May was another 5-star prediction, and that was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. So this is another adult high fantasy. This is set across 2 different continents. In the west is the land of Virtudom, and the capital of Virtudom is Innis. And Virtudom worships the Saint Gallian Berethnet, who supposedly in ages past defeated the great dragon, the Nameless One, and imprisoned him beneath the earth. And so long as a member of Gallian's bloodline sits on the throne of Innis, the Nameless One can never return. And Iad Durian is a maid of the current queen, Sabran IX, who is actually a member of a secret order of dragon slayers who has been assigned to protect the queen. And there is also Lord Arteloth Beck, who is an ambassador to the draconic kingdom of Iskalin, which used to be a part of Virtudom, but recently broke away and started worshipping the Nameless One. And he has gone to Iskalin to investigate the disappearance of the previous ambassador, who was the Queen's father. Meanwhile, across the sea in the eastern land of Seiki, there is a woman called Tane, who has trained all of her life to become a dragon rider, and when her position is put in jeopardy by the arrival of a stranger, she takes him to hide him with an exile from Virtudom called Niclase Roos, who is a disgraced alchemist. And that's sort of the full setup for the story. I can't say much more than that. But I love this book. I gave it 4.5 stars, but I might drop that down to just 4. I loved the characters, I loved the world building, the plot was incredible, and there were some really intriguing mysteries which unravelled perfectly. There were some unanswered questions, but you can sort of read between the lines to get the answer. And there is some really cinematic action in this, the magic system is great, and there are some really brilliant scenes, there is a really cute romance in here. Of the main characters, Iad is a woman who likes women. She's probably gay, but it isn't specified. Niclase is definitely gay, and it's possible that Arteloth and Tane are both asexual, but I've only really heard people say it about Arteloth, so it's probably a safe bet to say that he is, but I'm not quite sure about Tane. But that is not explicit in the text for either of them. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I'll leave my notes linked in the description. The first book I read in June was yet another 5-star prediction. Don't worry, it's the last one. And that was A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms by George R.R. Martin. And this is the first 3 novellas in the Tales of Dunk and Egg, which is a prequel series to A Song of Ice and Fire. And I enjoyed this book, but not as much as everyone else seems to. There are 3 novellas in here. The Hedge Knight I thought was good. I really didn't like it for the first half, but the ending did bring it up to 4 stars. The Sworn Sword was absolutely incredible. It was so atmospheric and character-focused and deep, with loads of really interesting side characters and some great world-building information, and the atmosphere was perfection, and I gave that 5 stars. And the last one, The Mystery Knight, was better than The Hedge Knight, but ultimately just a bit average really. It had some cool characters, especially Sir Glendon Ball, he was quite interesting, and it had some really sweet development for Dunk and Egg's relationship, and I gave it 4 stars. And so overall I gave this a 4 stars. It's not my favourite thing in the world, and I'll tell you why. It's because I don't like Dunk. It's not that I don't like him, but everyone else seems to love him, and I'm just... he's fine. Dunk is fine. He's a good man. He's nice. He's sweet. Whatever. Oh, but he's also just so annoying. He's a commoner in this world, and that means he's kind of stupid. It's not even that Dunk himself is annoying, it's that the narration of Dunk's thoughts is so repetitive. It's just so irritating. And also, George R.R. Martin cannot write romance to save his life. Like, the only good romances in A Song of Ice and Fire were Ned and Kat and Renly and Loras, and Renly and Loras didn't even get their relationship confirmed, so... But yeah, this really is clear evidence of George R.R. Martin's failure to write romance. Just Stop trying. I feel bad saying that, but he's not good at it. But yeah, it was good, but it's not a favourite. I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read in June was The Subtle Knife by Philip Pullman, and this is the second book in His Dark Materials series. And His Dark Materials is set in a world where the human soul is personified outside the body in the form of an animal called a demon. So the first book follows a 12-year-old girl called Lyra Balakwa, whose uncle Azrael comes to the college where she lives with evidence of parallel worlds, and he is seeking funding to investigate this phenomenon further. And meanwhile, a sinister group is abducting children for unknown purposes, and Lyra's best friend gets abducted, and she has to try and find him again. And the series is also a commentary on organised religion, and also the idea of God a bit, at least as far as I can tell. We'll see. I've only read the first 2 books. So I like this book, I gave it 3.75 stars. This book does introduce a new protagonist, as well as Lyra, who is called Will, and he's alright. He's fairly interesting. I don't like him as much as I like Lyra, and the plot of this book is also just a little bit contrived. Like, some stuff happens just because it needs to happen for the story, it feels like, and I really didn't like that. And there is also just a really ridiculous scene, which is just so random. And it's not random, but it doesn't fit with everything else that's been established about the world. And that being said, some of the positives of this book are the development to the world building is great, and there are some quite interesting new characters who are introduced, and the plot development is also interesting. But yeah, I didn't like it as much as the first one, and I didn't like it as much as I expected to, which was quite annoying. But yeah, it was good. And the last book I read in June, and the last book of this wrap-up, is Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer. This was one of my favourite series when I was a kid, and this is the first time I'm reading it since then. And this is about a child genius called Artemis Fowl, who wants to restore his family's fortune by kidnapping a fairy and holding it to ransom. So yeah, Artemis is the main character. He is also the villain. And I want to make it very clear that Artemis Fowl is the villain, not whatever the hell the movie tried to do with him. Okay? That out of the way. This book actually holds up surprisingly well. One thing I really appreciated about this was that the world building was really imaginative and fun and different to really any other fantasy series I've ever read. It takes all of these really typical fantasy races and it twists them in a way that makes them just different to all of the other times that they've been done, and I really liked that. And I also really liked the kind of relentless environmentalism in this. There is quite a lot of commentary on pollution and animal cruelty and stuff that I really didn't expect. I didn't remember it, certainly. And other than that, the story is very cinematic and action-packed, and the plot is very clever and well done. But I only gave this 3 stars, and some of that is just because it's a middle grade series and it doesn't quite connect with me anymore. But some of it is because the characters are fun, but they lack quite a lot of depth, and there's not really any reason to get emotionally invested in them other than Artemis's mother. But that brings me to another thing that I kind of didn't like about it, was the depiction of mental illness. It was quite well done, I think, but the way it's handled kind of rubs me the wrong way, and I can't really say what I mean about that without spoilers, but what they do with Artemis's mother's mental illness towards the end kind of bugged me quite a bit. And I don't know if I would have picked up on it without the current climate. I hope I would have done. But the worst thing about this book, and something that just made me super uncomfortable while I was reading it, was there is a ton of police brutality in this. And the fact that police brutality done by the good guys being played for laughs in a book directed at kids really makes me very uncomfortable, and that really does bring down my rating. But it was still good, I gave it 3 stars. It's not quite for me anymore. It was fun, I liked it, and I'll continue to reread the series and read the ones that I didn't get around to for the first time, but I'm not expecting too much from it. I have written a full review for this, which I will leave linked in the description. So yeah, that was every book I read in April, May and June. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear what you thought about them, so please leave that in the comments, and also tell me what books did you read in, not necessarily all 3 of those months, but just recently. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter or add me as a friend on Goodreads, links to both of those in the description, and I will hopefully have another video up soon. But until then, thank you for watching. I have been Isaac, and this has been Books with Ike. Goodbye.